Hey everybody, this one is talking about do-it-yourself dealing with child protective services. And so the important thing to understand who you're dealing with, well, you need to understand who you're dealing with when it comes to child protective services. And so we're going to go through that first. Several people have contacted me about having to deal with CPS. They've been in Australia, Canada, United Kingdom, and the USA. All these countries are under a military occupation and martial law rule. And first of all, martial law is voluntary. All of these countries are signatories to the UNIDROIT Statute, and all of these countries are signatories to the Hague Convention 4, the Geneva Convention on the Treatment of Civilians in a Time of War of 1949, and the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. This is the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. Every child shall have, without discrimination as to race, color, sex, language, religion, social or national origin, property or birth, the right to such measures of protection as are required by his status as a minor status, it's Roman law, as part of the family, society, and the state. Every child should be registered immediately after birth and shall have a name. They pass statutes about that in every state that I know about. And but it's a voluntary submission. Okay, the real solution is to have babies at home with a midwife or something like that, and then everything changes. Every child has the right to acquire a nationality. Watch my video about do-it-yourself, no birth certificate. All persons shall be equal before the courts and tribunals. This is Article 14 in the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. Well, that's every, all persons, that's what's registered, that's a Sestakay Trust. That's what the birth certificate creates. This is the law and customs of war on land, Hague Convention 4, Article 42. Territory is considered occupied when it is actually placed under authority of the hostile army. The occupation extends only to the territory where such authority has been established and can be exercised. Well, in the British Empire, okay, how did the British Empire expand? The only way the British Empire could expand was by sea, okay? The law of the sea, admiralty, okay, the military. So everywhere that the British Empire went is under military occupation, and in fact it talks about it in the Treaty of 1763, or not the treaty, the Royal Proclamation of 1763 for North America, because at that time everything west of Quebec was Indian territory, everything west of the 13 colonies was Indian territory, and so that means that it's now under military occupation. Anyways, this is Article 2 of the Geneva Convention relative to the protection of civilians in the time of war of 1949. And I was going to say Australia. Okay, Australia was a prison colony. Okay, and in England, okay, Scotland was conquered. Okay, so it's certainly under a military occupation in the UK. Anyways, this is Article 2 of the Geneva Convention relative to the protection of civilians in the time of war of 1949. In addition to the provisions which shall be implemented in peacetime, the present convention shall apply to all cases of declared war or of any other armed conflict which may arise between two or more of the high contracting parties, even if the state of war is not recognized by one of them. Okay? Even if the state of war is not recognized by one of them. The convention shall also apply to all cases of partial or total occupation of the territory of a high contracting party, even if the said occupation meets no armed resistance. Although one of the powers in conflict may not be a party to the present convention, the powers who are parties thereto shall remain bound by it in their mutual relations. They shall furthermore be bound by the convention in relation to the said power if the latter accepts and applies the provisions thereof. And so, if the war isn't recognized by one of the parties, it doesn't matter. If there's no armed resistance, it doesn't matter. And if one of the parties is not a member of the a high contracting party to this Geneva Convention, it doesn't matter. This is Article 1 of the Libre Code. A place, district, or country occupied by an enemy stands in consequence of the occupation under the martial law of the invading or occupying enemy, whether any proclamation declaring martial law or any public warning to the inhabitants has been issued or not. Martial law is the immediate and direct effect and consequence of occupation or conquest. The presence of a hostile army proclaims its martial law. Okay? Martial law does not cease during a hostile occupation except by special proclamation ordered by the commander-in-chief or by special mention in the Treaty of Peace concluding the war, when the occupation of a place or territory continues beyond the conclusion of peace as one of the conditions of the same. That's Article 2 of the Libre Code. So, the southern states in the U.S. in particular, there's been no Treaty of Peace, first of all, and there's been no royal proclamation by the commander saying that martial law has ended. So the southern states are definitely under martial law. The states involved in the Treaty of Hidalgo, which is California, Arizona, New Mexico, Utah, and maybe Colorado, or at least parts of Colorado. Anyways, there was a Treaty of Hidalgo, but there's nothing in there about the martial law being concluded. So therefore, it continues to this day. And beyond that, there's nothing in the Oregon Treaty, okay, that says anything about it, and that was under military occupation by the Crown. I mean, it just goes on and on, okay? This is the non-ratification of the 14th Amendment by Judge A.H. Ellett, Utah Supreme Court, which is associated with D.I.Y versus Turner, the case D.I.Y versus Turner. And this is, see, he's got in this book, it's about 150 pages, and he's got the entire Libre Code in there, and he's got these notes, these comments on different articles of the Libre Code. This is a comment on Article 3, and it's directly relevant to any place that's under a military occupation. Note, under the law martial, only the criminal jurisdiction of a military court is the recognized law. But as Article 3 says, the civil courts can continue wholly or in part as long as the civil jurisdiction does not violate the military orders laid down by the commander-in-chief or one of his commanders. By this means, a military venue, jurisdiction, and authority are imposed upon the occupied populace under disguise of the ordinary civil courts and officers of the occupied district or region, because the so-called civil authorities in an occupied district or region only act at the pleasure of a military authority. It should also be noted here that the several state legislatures, county boards of commissioners, and city councils are constantly legislating to please the edicts of the federal government, which is the occupying force in the case of the southern states, which is what this is about. And that their legislation in this sense is not an exercise of state sovereignty, but instead a compliance with the edicts of the military force which occupies the several states and consequently are edicts of martial law rule. And that can apply anywhere that's under martial law, okay, or that's under military occupation. And so any place that has ever been under a military occupation, unless there's a proclamation saying that the martial law ended or something in a treaty of peace, it's still under military occupation. And just because they have a legislature there and a city council that's doing certain things doesn't mean a hill of beans. It's still under military occupation. And the stuff they do are edicts of the martial law. So that's what CPS is, okay? We're talking about CPS. This is Article 3 of the Geneva Convention relative to the protection of civilians in the time of war of 1949. No protected person may be punished for an offense he or she has not personally committed. Collective penalties and likewise all measures of intimidation or of terrorism are prohibited. Pillage is prohibited. Reprisals against protected persons and their property are prohibited. So this is your out, okay? This is what Carl Lentz did when he got his son back after 11 years. They stole his son at birth, and it took him 11 years, but he got his son back, and he filed a one-page lawsuit, and he said, I require my property. And they said, well, what's your property? And he held up a picture. This is my property. And that's all he would say. He stuck to that argument no matter what. And so, anyways, this is the way you have to proceed. Now, you have to understand that if CPS is attacking you, it's because you're asleep at the wheel. Okay? We're really victims of our own ignorance because we were ignorant of the law. We were ignorant of what's going on. And then they start assaulting us, and we start waking up and saying, what the heck is going on here? And then we start finding out. And so the point is that the further along in the process, the more difficult it is. Now, but that's not to say it's not impossible, because it is. You can get a remedy. It's not going to be easy. These people are Satanists, okay? This is the book of Revelation's happening. This is Lucifer in all his glory that's reigning right now. This is Article 51 of the Geneva Convention relative to the protection of civilians in the time of war of 1949. And the occupying power may not compel protected persons to serve in its armed or auxiliary forces. No pressure or propaganda which aims at securing voluntary enlistment is permitted. And so that's why they cannot do conscription. And they also, doing their selective service registration in the draft, is also unconstitutional. And anybody who does not want to go to war does not have to. And they need to bring this up because there's several ways. The military occupation certainly happens, but martial law can happen in other ways besides a military occupation. So the important thing to understand is that any place that's under a military occupation, you do not have to be conscripted. And this is the argument right here. Article 52, Geneva Convention relative to the protection of civilians in the time of war of 1949. No contract, agreement, or regulation shall impair the right of any worker, whether voluntary or not, and wherever he may be, to apply to the representatives of the protecting power in order to request the said power's intervention, okay? Well, these Baal priests, Satanists in the courts, sell their justice, and then they accuse you of bad faith. Well, bad faith is a contract, okay? So they're in breach of Article 52. All measures aiming at creating unemployment or at restricting the opportunities offered to workers in an occupied territory in order to induce them to work for the occupying power are prohibited. Okay, and they're doing that too. Article 66, Geneva Convention relative to the protection of civilians in time of war. In the case of a breach of the penal provisions promulgated by it by virtue of the second paragraph of Article 64, the occupying power may hand over the accused to its properly constituted non-political military courts. In other words, the guy's got to be neutral and unbiased, and they're never neutral and unbiased. On condition that the said courts sit in the occupied country, courts of appeal shall preferably sit in occupied countries. That's why the Alberta Supreme Court got turned into the Alberta Court of Appeals. Okay, and the BC Supreme Court is now the BC Court of Appeals, and the Saskatchewan Supreme Court is now the Saskatchewan Court of Appeals, and the Manitoba Supreme Court is now the Manitoba Court of Appeals. Even in Ontario, it's called the Manitoba Court of Appeals. And that's in Canada, okay? I wouldn't be surprised to see it start happening here in the USA. This is International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, Article 1, Clause 3. The state parties to the present covenant, including those have responsibility for the administration of non-self-governing and trust territories. That's talking about territories that are under a military occupation. 14th Amendment. Okay, so they're talking about persons. You read through these documents and it talks about civilians and it talks about persons. Okay, well, and so we got to go to what a person is. All persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction are citizens of the United States. Okay, so the 14th Amendment, Section 1, talks about it. Okay, C, the so-called 14th Amendment is unconstitutional video. C, the U.S. citizen is a slave video. C, the U.S. citizen is an enemy of the state video. C, the Roman cult owns and operates the United States video. C, the all courts are Roman cult courts video. A citizen of the United States is a civilly dead entity operating as co-trustee and co-beneficiary of the Public Charitable Trust, the Constructive Cestacate Trust of U.S. Inc. under the 14th Amendment, which upholds the debt of the USA and U.S. Inc. And now what that is, just for clarification so nobody comes looking me up afterwards saying, I can't find that. That is a summary of what 5 pages of the Congressional Record says on June 13, 1967. In rebolence, every taxpayer is a cestacate trust, having sufficient interest in preventing the abuse of the trust to be recognized in the field of this court's prerogative jurisdiction. Okay, so who's a taxpayer? A taxpayer is a U.S. citizen. And this is D.C. Code. And an act to establish a code for the District of Columbia, and this is located at 31 Stat 1432 at Section 1617, the legal estate to be in the cestacate use. Okay, that's a cestacate trust. And again, this is going back to the Roman cult is where it's going to. Absence for 7 years. This is the D.C. Code again, located at 31 Stat 1230, Section 252, a presumption of death. And what this does is it gives them the right, the legal estate is in a cestacate trust. It gives them the right to presume you're dead. Okay, that's what a cestacate trust is a trust for dead things. And this is Tomlin's Law Dictionary, 1835 edition, volume 2, under the definition of mort main. This is talking about the cestacate trust, and the reason it is it all is coming from the Roman cult. And so it starts off, yet still it was found difficult to set bounds to ecclesiastical ingenuity. That's the Roman cult, folks. For when they were driven out of all their former holds, they devised a new method of conveyance by which the lands were granted, not to themselves directly, but to nominal fiefs to the use of the religious houses, thus distinguishing between the possession and the use, and receiving the actual profits, while a season of the land remained in the nominal fief, who was held by the courts of equity, then under the direction of the clergy. That's the Roman cult, folks. To be bound in conscience to account to a cestacate use for the rents and emoluments of the estate. That's taxes. And it is to these inventions that our practitioners are indebted for the introduction of uses and trusts, the foundation of modern conveyancing. Well, if it's the foundation of modern conveyancing in 1835, it's certainly the foundation of modern conveyancing today too. And it's used in a lot more than just conveyancing. The privileges and immunities of United States, citizens of the United States, do not necessarily include all the rights protected by the first 8 amendments to the federal Constitution against the powers of the federal government. A U.S. citizen has no rights. The only absolute and unqualified right of a United States citizen is the residence within the territorial boundaries of the United States. A cestacate trust has no rights. It is property. These people are Satanists. Everything they do is a fraud and a deception, and if you participate, you cannot complain. And now a little interlude. This is an advertisement to subscribe to this channel. Don't forget to click on the bell next to the subscribe button so you're notified when there's a new upload. This is the front page of the channel, and the arrow is pointing at the bell. Make sure and click on that bell, and that way you'll be notified every time there's a new upload. Back to the topic at hand. Civil law equals Roman law. Okay, this is all coming from the Roman cult. Civil law, and Roman civil law are convertible phrases meaning the same system of jurisprudence, that rule of action which every particular nation, commonwealth, or city has established peculiarly for itself, more properly called municipal law, to distinguish it from the law of nature and from international law. And they talk about persons, and they talk about status all throughout these Roman law statutes. And this is the Law of Persons by Joseph R. Long, published in 1912. Section 1, the very first section, it says classification of persons. The Roman law distinguished 3 kinds of personal status. Okay, this is all Roman law, or degree of legal capacity, and classified human beings with respect thereto as follows. And so they go through that. Section 3, loss of freedom. a Roman citizen cannot legally be sold into slavery, but he might become a slave by condemnation for a crime or by being captured by an enemy. That sounds like being sold into slavery. And that's, again, the law of persons. It's all about status. Under common law, status means nothing. Are you a person? Under what the courts are saying, a person is a variety of entities other than human beings. Persons are foreigners and not citizens. When used in this title, were not otherwise distinctly, expressly, or manifest incompatible with the intent thereof. See, that's these liars put in all these little confusing terminologies in there so that you got to sit there and think about what they're saying. And person, the term person shall be construed and mean an individual, trust, estate, partnership, association, company, or corporation. Well, under the courts have ruled that include is limiting, first of all. So then when it says it includes, that means that it's an individual, trust, estate, partnership, association, company, or corporation. That's all it is. Okay, there's nothing that's not there. And under the maxim of law justum generis, then because a trust, estate, partnership, association, company, or corporation are all fictitious entities, an individual is as well a fictitious entity. The words person and whoever include corporations, companies, associations, firms, partnerships, societies, joint stock companies, as well as individuals. Again, those are all fictitious entities, and there's nothing there that's not specifically written. Texas Transportation Code is the same thing. Person means an individual, firm, partnership, association, or corporation. Texas Government Code, person includes a corporation, organization, governmental entity, subdivision, or agency, business trust, estate, trust, partnership, association, or other legal entity. Okay, so it's all fictions. Include, or the participial form thereof, is defined to comprise within, to hold, to contain, enclose, comprise, comprehend, embrace, involve. Okay, so that's limiting. Include, under American, that was Montello Salt, U.S. Supreme Court case, American Dictionary of English Language. Include is to confine within, to hold, to contain, as a nut, shell of a nut includes the kernel. A pearl is included in the shell. To comprise, to comprehend, to contain. Include, Black's Law Dictionary, 6th edition, to confine within, to hold as an enclosure, take in, attain, shut up, contain, enclose, comprise, comprehend. Justum generis, a canon of construction that when a general word or phrase follows a list of specifics, the general word or phrase will be interpreted to include only those items of the same type as those listed. For example, in the phrase horses, cattle, sheep, pigs, goats, or any other farm animal, the general language or any other farm animal, despite its seeming breadth, would probably be held to include only four-legged hoofed mammals typically found on farms, and thus would exclude chickens. And that's Black's Law Dictionary, 8th edition. And back to a little interlude, an advertisement announcing a subscription-based YouTube channel called Sovereignty International. The recommended cost of the subscription is currently $1.99 a month because it avoids the advertising only. When I first set up this channel, I was planning on having some exclusive material, and I do have a little bit, but it's certainly not very much. I have an Arlington private information share up there. That's the only thing that's exclusive, so I thought about it, and the only power that these New World Order Satanists have over us is through fraud and deception, and my agenda is to expose it all. And so, for that reason, I couldn't think of anything that I really wanted to have exclusively on that channel that I didn't want to have available for free to anybody that wants it. And so there's nothing, I can't think of anything that really, I mean, that Arlington private information share is going to be up there, but beyond that, I can't promise anything will be exclusive. I might come up with some stuff to put up there exclusively, but right now, I mean, that's all I can promise you is that you'll get out of the advertising. Anyways, I'm currently publishing 5 videos a week. Some people have had trouble finding my channel, and so a link to the channel is at the bottom of the screen. That's about as good as it's going to get. This is my channel, and if you look at the top is a link to the channel again. And if you look on the side, some people actually sent me $1.99, and I sent them an email back and asked them if this was because they wanted to subscribe, and they never did respond. And so I just want to make sure everybody's aware that I cannot sign anybody up to subscribe. I have no control over that. If you want to subscribe, you got to click on the Start Free Trial button that's there, and you'll get 14 days for free, and that's how it'll work. And I wish I could tell you otherwise. I have no control over who subscribes, and I might be able to remove people if they really want to be removed, but beyond that, I have no control over it. Anyways, back to the topic at hand. These CPS people, they go and deliberately screen out anybody that's intelligent, so they find people that are low intelligence people in their hiring process. Jordan versus City of New London is a great case that explains that. The U.S. Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit, case number 99-9188. Jordan had a master's degree, scored too high on their test, too intelligent. They didn't want anybody with brains to be their code enforcers. They want an order follower, okay? That's all Satanism, is order followers. And this is New London, Connecticut, ABC News article on the internet. Talks about a man whose bid to become a police officer was rejected after he scored too high on an intelligence test, has lost an appeal in his federal lawsuit against the city. And so there's a guy by the name of Mark Passio. He's a former Satanist priest, and he has some great natural law videos, talks about the pillars of Satanism. Had to take Latin in high school, so he's really intelligent, goes through the derivative of these words, and brilliant guy. Anyways, he talks about the pillars of Satanism, and we all need to know what this is all about because it's happening around us all over the place. Anyways, there's no absolute right or wrong. Truth is relative. We just make up what's right or wrong. What's right or wrong is what we decide today, and tomorrow will be something else. According to Passio, 2/3 of the Americans are practicing Satanists, believe it or not. Even told a little story about his own grandmother. He told her she's a practicing Satanist, and she didn't even argue with him. And so I think it's more like about 90%, quite frankly. But at any rate, more pillars of Satanism, according to Passio, are order followers, and he's right on the money here, okay? They're responsible for all the atrocities in history. They just follow orders without thinking about whether it's a lawful order or not. They're willing slaves. And again, it goes down to these low intelligent thugs, okay? They just want order followers. And back to this about what's right or wrong. That's a court case, okay? That's these bail priests sitting in these kangaroo courts, and they sit there and make up what's right or wrong, and tomorrow it's going to be something completely different. And that's a court case for sure. Anyways, anyone who's wearing a military uniform is agent of the Roman cult. And this is Article 10 of the Concordat of 1933. The wearing a clerical dress or religious habit on the part of layfolk is liable to the same penalty on the part of the state as the misuse of a military uniform. All so-called governments are bankrupt and owned and operated by the Roman cult. See United States is owned and operated by the Roman cult video. At common law, a sheriff would have a star only. At common law, there's no uniform. The war crimes tribunals. All the Nazis claimed they were just following orders. Well, that's telling me that they were admitting they were Satanists. They either suffered death by hanging or spent the rest of their life in jail. Some of them are still hunted to this day. The Vietnam War, the My Lai massacre, they were convicted of murder. Today, order followers are everywhere. Another little diversion. Check out my other videos. Bankster Thieves 1, 2, and 3, Churchianity series, bankrupt corporate so-called governments. Bar members 1, 2, and 3, do-it-yourself, how not to volunteer for the selective service of the draft. Martial laws here, do-it-yourself, no income tax, do-it-yourself, no sales tax, do-it-yourself, traffic stop 1 and 2, do-it-yourself, free mail 1 and 2, do-it-yourself, kangaroo courts 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8, and 9 coming up. Anyway, so to understand the nature of what's going on, we got to understand UNIDROIT, okay? Because this all falls under UNIDROIT. The CPS pigs work under UNIDROIT. UNIDROIT stands for Unification of Private Law. The website says that 63 countries have adopted it. It's designed to be automatically implemented, okay? In other words, the UNIDROIT is over in Rome, and they go and pass some new law or something like that, and all the countries have to follow it. And Canada, United States have been signatories to the UNIDROIT Treaty for over 30 years. UNIDROIT website said it's designed to be automatically implemented. UNIDROIT makes a change, and the signatories of the treaty are required to make the same changes. This is their website. This is getting in closer. They talks about all sorts of things, but commercial contracts, cultural property, franchising, This is more stuff here. Notice the header at the top: leasing, security interest, transports, banking law, capital markets, civil procedure. Okay, all these courts are all under UNIDROIT. Contracts, cultural property, franchising, hotel keepers, insurance, intellectual property, leasing, legal status of women, maintenance obligations, movement of persons, negotiable instruments, all the IOUs that are circulating for money. UNIDROIT covers mandatory insurance for motor vehicles, anything related to marriage, divorce, and children. Okay, so this is CPS falls directly under UNIDROIT. It's a commercial transaction. This is again, this is off the UNIDROIT website. 1955 Benelux Treaty on compulsory insurance against civil liability in respect of motor vehicles, and the 1958 Convention concerning the recognition and enforcement of decisions relating to maintenance obligations toward children, a 1959 Convention on compulsory insurance against civil liability in respect of motor vehicles. So the bottom line is that UNIDROIT is heavily involved. That's who these CPS people are. It's all commerce. It's all business. Okay, these are Satanists. They're getting you into one of their satanic contracts is what they're doing. And this is the membership. Australia, Canada, there's a whole bunch of them there. I'm not going to go through them all. If you want to pause it and look at them, that's fine. There's United Kingdom, United States, a whole bunch of them. And now another little advertisement. CubeYard.com. For great custom websites, domain names, and hostings, go to CubeYard.com. And if you want to use coupon code CY172 for 20% off your first order. CubeYard.com, your source for websites, domain names, and hosting. Back to the topic at hand, the UNIDROIT. And so the Uniform Commercial Code is the UNIDROIT in United States. It's actually the same thing everywhere, so you could use the Uniform Commercial Code anywhere in the United States. You could use it in Canada. You could use it in England. You could use it. It's all the same thing because it's all coming from UNIDROIT. And so anyways, whenever the Uniform Commercial Code creates a presumption with respect to a fact or provides that a fact is presumed, the trier of fact must find the existence of the fact unless and until evidence is introduced that supports a finding of its non-existence. So that's section 1-206, and it talks about presumptions. Okay, so anyways, there's a bunch of presumptions that they make that unless you know that that's what's going on, they're just going to walk all over you. This is the Uniform Commercial Code section 3.308, proof of signatures and status as holder in due course. In an action with respect to an instrument, the authenticity of and authority to make each signature on the instrument are admitted unless specifically denied in the pleading. So if you don't know that there's a contract and you don't deny that there's a contract, then there's a contract. That's exactly how this works. If the validity of a signature is denied in the pleadings, the burden of establishing validity is on the person claiming validity, but the signature is presumed to be authentic and authorized unless the action is to enforce the liability of the purported signer and the signer is dead or incompetent. So the signature is presumed to be authentic and authorized unless you dispute it, okay? If the validity of the signature is denied, then they have the burden of proving it, okay? So, again, you got to challenge that, okay? That's what Carl Lentz did when he got his son back. He went and one of the things, his one-page lawsuit, he said forgery, okay? He went after them for forgery, forged his signature onto a contract. Uniform Commercial Code, Section 8.114, evidentiary rules concerning certificated securities. The following rules apply in an action or on a certificated security against the issuer. They're selling these. They're forging your signature onto contracts and selling them on Wall Street. It's a security is what it is. Unless specifically denied in the pleadings, the signature on a security certificate or in a necessary endorsement is admitted. If the effectiveness of a signature is put in issue, the burden of establishing effectiveness is on the party claiming under the signature, but the signature is presumed to be genuine or authorized. Okay, so again, you have to dispute the fact that, they can presume, and so they can forge your signature on the contract, and then they can presume that it's there and sell you into slavery or steal your children or do whatever they want to do. So again, this comes down to stuff that needs to be put into estoppel certificates. And if you don't know what that is, I have a whole video on estoppel certificates. They're assaulting you with their law merchant. Okay, this is the Federal Tax Lien Act of 1966. Definition, a motor vehicle. The term motor vehicle means a self-propelled vehicle which is registered for highway use under the laws of any state or foreign country. Okay, so all it has to be is registered, and they can presume that you have a commercial vehicle. Okay. Security, the term security means any bond, debenture, note, certificate, or other evidence of indebtedness included, issued by a corporation or government or other political subdivision thereof with interest, coupons, and registered form, share of stock, voting trust. These are all commercial terms, negotiable instrument, money. This is all commerce. This all falls under the Uniform Commercial Code. And commercial terms, we need to stay away from these commercial terms. If you use these terms, you're saying that you're involved in commerce. Okay. Register, security, negotiable instrument, debt, motor vehicle, those are all found in that Federal Tax Lien Act of 1966. Motor vehicle, purchase, interest, debenture, bond. I mean, there's more. There's a lot more. These are just a few. The Federal Tax Lien Act of 1966 creates a presumption that if they see any of that, okay, then they can presume that you're involved in commerce. Exactly. And there's a Clearfield doctrine. If you don't know what that is, I forgot to put that in here. But under the Clearfield doctrine, if you're in commerce, then you're a slave. Okay. The power to create presumptions is not a means of escape from constitutional restrictions. So you have to defeat their presumptions. And this is the War Crimes Act of Canada. Okay. And the United States. Well, the reason I'm mentioning this in Canada is I think Australia's probably got a similar thing in UK, but United States never did sign on to the Rome Statute. This thing mentions the Rome Statute. So that means the International Criminal Court. So war crimes in the United States are much more severe. In other words, it has to be like murder and things like that, whereas in Canada and the United States, it can be stuff like pillaging, okay, stealing your property. And in Canada, Australia, England, pillaging, stealing your property, and that's what you come down with your biological property is your property. Okay, it's not children. Crime against humanity means murder, extermination, enslavement, deportment, imprisonment, torture, sexual violence, persecution, or any other inhumane act or omission that is committed against any civilian population or any identifiable group, and that at the time and in the place of its commission constitutes a crime against humanity. Genocide means, and it's not that I'm saying that genocide is not important. It's not the topic of discussion in this particular preview or presentation, so we're not going to talk about that. But it's very serious, and you need to look it up if you're concerned. War crime means an act or omission committed during an armed conflict that at the time and in the place of its commission constitutes a war crime. And that's the Crimes Against Humanity and War Crimes Act of Canada. And this is more of that. Every person is guilty of an indictable offense who commits genocide, crime against humanity, or war crime, and then conspiracy, attempt, etc. Every person who conspires or attempts to commit is an accessory after the fact in relation to or counsels in relation to an offense referred to in subsection 1 is guilty of an indictable offense. Punishment, every person who commits an offense under subsection 1 shall be sentenced to imprisonment for life if an intentional killing forms the basis of the offense, and B is liable to imprison for life in any other case. So it's pretty severe. And then the definitions, and this is where it brings in the Rome Statute. The definitions in this subsection apply in this act. Conventional international law means any convention, treaty, or other international agreement that's in force and to which Canada is a party, or that is in force in the provisions of which Canada has agreed to accept and apply in an armed conflict in which it is involved. International Criminal Court means International Criminal Court established by the Rome Statute. And so the Rome Statute is where we're going to go next. And this applies in Canada, and this is what they're doing. Okay, CPS is doing, but in the States it's going to be a little bit more difficult. But you could still allege the war crimes, but you're not going to have the remedies that you might otherwise have. because the International Criminal Court, they don't recognize it in the states. Anyways, this is the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court, Article 8A, war crimes. The court shall have jurisdiction in respect of war crimes, in particular when committed as part of a plan or policy. For purposes of this statute, war crimes means grave breaches of the Geneva Conventions of 12 August 1949, namely any of the following acts against persons or property. Extensive destruction or appropriation of property, okay, when they steal your property, your biological property, okay. Not justified by military necessity and carried out unlawfully and wantonly. Okay, that's probably something that's going on with your biological property. Compelling a prisoner of war or other protected person to serve in the hostile forces of the hostile army. That's again goes back to conscription. Willfully depriving a prisoner of war or other protected person of the rights of fair and regular trial. Oh, that happens all the time. These people are a bunch of Satanists. It's a kangaroo court. Unlawful deportation or transfer or unlawful confinement happens all the time. Other serious violations. Okay, so this is paragraph B of the same thing. Other serious violations. Intentionally directing attacks against individual citizens not taking part in hostilities. Intentionally directing attacks against civilian objects. Intentionally launching attack in the knowledge that such attack will cause injury to civilians or damage to civilian objects. Okay, none of that has to do with CPS, but some of these do, I'm sure. Destroying or seizing the enemy's property. That does, for sure. Unless such destruction or seizure may be imperatively demanded by the necessities of war. Well, it certainly is not demanded by the necessities of war. Declaring abolished, suspended, or inadmissible in a court of law the rights and actions of the nationals of the hostile party. Pillaging. Okay, that's when they steal your property. Committing outrages upon personal dignity, in particular humiliating and degrading treatment. Okay, so again, when they steal your biological property, so that's where you have to go with it. It's your biological property. This would apply, again, this is the UNIDROIT. This goes back to UNIDROIT. This would apply to any of the 63 countries. And so, again, there's no treaty law. See, they've gone and used this UNIDROIT, and they're using it internally, and they can't do that, okay? Matter of fact, none of this stuff they can do it, but they're assaulting you with it. So you never tell them that it's something you're required to do, it's something they're required to do, and they can't even use it internally, okay? So they're using, it's unconstitutional for them to use their treaty power internally, and that's exactly what they're doing with UNIDROIT, okay? UNIDROIT is to be used in external contracts only. And this is Mayor of New Orleans versus United States. The government of the United States is one of limited powers that can exercise authority over no subjects except those which have been delegated to it. Congress cannot, by legislation, enlarge the federal jurisdiction, nor can it be enlarged under the treaty-making power. And so they cannot use the treaty power internally. But Madison insisted that just because this power is given to Congress, it did not follow that the treaty power was absolute and unlimited. The President and the Senate lacked the power to dismember the empire. For example, because the exercise of the power must be consistent with the object of the delegation. The object of treaties in Madison's oft-repeated formulation is the regulation of intercourse with foreign nations and is external. So they cannot use the UNIDROIT internally, okay? And they're doing it all the time. That's Bond versus United States. So these CPS pigs, we saw how they're involved in presumptions. They're forging your signatures. This is all symptoms of martial law, and so you have to defeat their presumptions. And so you need to see the estoppel certificates video, and that'll tell you how you can defeat their presumptions. The best way to defeat their presumption is to do it long before they ever see you. And so if you haven't done it, if they've already stolen your biological property and they're stealing your money or your fake money, then that's because you were asleep at the wheel. Okay, you failed to defeat their presumptions. The first things these order followers want is for you to give evidence against yourself. So you have to be careful about doing that. And so it's not fatal, but it makes it a lot more difficult because you were asleep at the wheel. Date of birth, just remember all of this stuff that they want, okay? They want, like, if they ask you for a birth certificate for your biological property, give them an affidavit, okay, and a picture. And Do not ever give them a birth certificate, okay? That's evidence that it's their property. Do not ever give them a birth certificate. Matter of fact, an affidavit with witnesses, if you can. The first thing these order followers want is for you to give evidence against yourself, date of birth, okay? That's hearsay. Name is hearsay. Vehicle registration is hearsay. Insurance is hearsay. It's all hearsay. Everything they want is hearsay. Do you have a child? Absolutely not. You have property, okay? That's what Carl Lentz used. Do you have children? Absolutely not. You have property. Show them a picture of your property. Answer their questions with, I neither admit nor deny anything. Carl Lentz was able to get his son back after 11 years by filing a one-page lawsuit. And in that lawsuit, it talked about forgery and it talked about wanting his property back. Remember that they're Satanists and they have nothing to do with justice. They're nothing but a bunch of thieves, okay? They're thieves. They're pirates. They're the lowest form of life there is. At common law, you know, that's the first order of business these Satanists do, is they got to get rid of common law, because at common law, they'd be put to death. Everything they do is a denial of due process. When they deny due process, they lose subject matter jurisdiction. If they do not have jurisdiction, then they cannot do anything judicial. And if they try to do anything judicial, it's a fraud and a nullity. See the void judgments video. File a notice of void judgment into the case. But the watchmen see the sword come and blow not the trumpet, and the people be not warned. If the sword come and take any person from among them, he's taken away in his iniquity, but his blood will I require at the watchman's hands. This is my effort to make sure that notify people so that the blood and sins of this generation are not in my hands, because there's a bunch of brain-dead people out there, and hopefully whoever's listening to this is starting to wake up. Either you're part of the problem or you're part of the solution. You're now a watchman. Circulate this video far and wide. Spread the word. Copies of these documents can be found in my private group at Yahoo called Administering Your Public Servants. I have YouTube videos that are videos of private information shares that show these and other court citations that are available for a donation. And this last paragraph is for all the Satanist order follower revenue officers operating in their private capacity under the Federal Tax Lien Act of 1966. Donations to support this work are appreciated, but they can put their privileges and benefits up their rectal orifice, because I prefer gold or silver coin. But as an extremely less desirable alternative, I can accept the commercial paper, the IOUs, the Federal Reserve notes, the PayPal gifts, the checks, the money orders. Send me an email for particulars. My blog is sovereigntyinternational.wordpress.com. My website is sovereigntyinternational.fyi. My email is engineerwin@yahoo. My YouTube profiles are Sovereign Living and Sovereignty International. My Facebook community page, I deleted it due to censorship on the part of Facebook. My private group called Sovereignty International is in the process of being deleted. It takes time to ban 17,000 people off the group, because I'm not going to allow Facebook to profit from my hard work. Yahoo private group is Administering Your Public Servants, and Google private group is called Administering Your Public Servants. I appreciate you taking the time to watch my video, and I hope it helps you out. I hope you get freed from under the clutches of these Satanists, and spread the word. Okay, knowledge is power, but you got to use it. It doesn't do you much good if you don't use it. And meanwhile, have a nice day.